to dramatise these a little in order to avoid writing dull history. Chapter 1. "They are here, Papa," Emily Willoughby announced nervously. "Robert and James. They await your pleasure." Rear Admiral Sir Francis Willoughby looked up from the book he was reading to eye his daughter with stem disapproval. "Have I not bidden you to knock before you enter my study?" he demanded with asperity. In awe of him, as she always was, and fearing his temper, Emily apologised. It was of no use, she knew, to tell him that she had knocked. He would not admit that it was his increasing deafness that had prevented him from hearing her. His disapproval, she also knew, was of her brothers, not herself, and although she could only guess at the reason for it, she supposed it was Robert's conduct that had once again aroused their father's ire. Since his court-martial 2 years ago, and his dismissal from the King's service, Robert had been in such constant trouble that, for some time past, he had been forbidden the house. His name never mentioned in the Admiral's presence. For this reason, Emily had been surprised to learn, only the previous day, that he had been sent for, and poor young Jamie with him. Though what Jamie could have done to warrant the peremptory demand for his attendance passed her comprehension. She sighed. Her younger brother was 13, a cadet at the Royal Naval College in Portsmouth, and nearing the end of his first year of study there. The excellence of his reports had hitherto afforded their father great satisfaction, and she could not help wondering why, in the middle of term, the boy had been required to make the long journey to Plymouth, at what had evidently been very short notice. "Shall I bid them come in, Papa?" she inquired, anxious to make her own escape. She would be sent out of the room, of course, once the boys presented themselves. Whatever their father had to say to them would not be for her ears, but she was accustomed to her exclusion, as a female, from purely masculine affairs, and in particular from matters pertaining to the naval service. Since her mother's death 8 years ago, she had kept house and supervised the upbringing of her 2 younger sisters, but, Emily reflected, conscious of a faint twinge of resentment, her duties and responsibilities had been purely domestic and largely taken for granted. She had never enjoyed her father's confidence or merited the interest he had shown in his sons, until, that was to say, poor Robert's fall from grace. When news of the findings of the court-martial had reached him, her father had wept, and for the first time and only time that she could remember, he had permitted her to witness his grief and to offer him consolation. Since that moment, however, he had held more aloof from her than ever, as if ashamed that he had allowed her to sense a weakness in him that she had never previously imagined he possessed. "Shall I?" Emily began, since he remained pensively silent. "Shall I serve coffee for you and the boys, Papa, or a bottle of your Madeira? They have had no time to break their fast, and Jamie has travelled all night. No," the Admiral cut her short. "You will serve nothing." The book he had been reading was flung down with such force that it slithered across the polished surface of his desk, to fall with a dull thud at her feet. It was a legal treatise, Emily observed with surprise as she bent to pick it up and replace it carefully within his reach. Her father's beetling white brows met in a forbidding frown. Offering no explanation, he gestured impatiently to the door. "Summon your brothers, if you please, and I wish you to be present when I talk to them, since what I have to say concerns you also, if indirectly. I must warn you, however, that it may well come as a shock to you." Emily hesitated for a moment. Then, her heart suddenly heavy with foreboding, she hastened to obey him. Her brothers were waiting in the pleasant sunny room that had been their mother's boudoir, and was now termed the morning room. Robert, tall, and in the civilian dress that made him seem a stranger, had, she saw, anticipated their father's refusal to offer him refreshment, for there was a decanter of brandy on the table beside him, and he had a half-empty glass in his hand. Jamie, looking ill at ease, cut an oddly contrasting